down south on 183 here at Ansley, Nebraska. I'm also the field director for RCAF USA, and so producers are my people. I meet you at the fairgrounds, the sale barn, anywhere producers want to meet and talk. So as I was talking with the committee at the Ranch Expo about what we could do to kind of bring cattle producers together, this was an idea. We're not here to talk at you. We're here to kind of have a conversation and open some dialogue up and talk about issues that are taking place in our industry, solutions that we can work towards, and we'll have a Q&A here at the end. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce the gentleman that I have with me today. I have Brett Kenzy from Gregory, South Dakota. He's a cow-calf operator and feedlot owner. And Eric Nelson joined us from Mobile, Iowa, a feedlot owner. We have Cowtown's own Shane Kaczor, and we have Matt Lowery from Burwell, who puts on 1 million miles marketing cattle every year, and so he really has his pulse on what's going on in the industry. And so the first question that I wanted to ask these gentlemen to talk about was just to talk about what is the pulse of the cattle industry, from where you operate or what you do within the industry. And so does anyone of you want to start, or do you want me to pick somebody out? Okay, Brett's going to start.
All right, I want to thank everybody for taking a minute to be here with us. And I guess I'm going to open my phone so I get the numbers right to put a historical perspective on where we are right now. As I think back, 2014 was the best year I ever had. We had $1.72 fat cattle and $2.57 box beef, and that gave us 52% return to the ranchers in rural America of what the consumer was paying for beef. And that's the way I like to frame it to people. Now, if you look at today, we have $1.20 fat cattle, $3.30 box beef, and that's less than 37% return. So as you look out at this farm show and you see all the equipment and all the things that we use to create beef, it's no wonder that we're hurt.
Yeah, just stand up here so that everybody can see it. Yeah.
Okay, and I guess we all know what it's like. The last thing that I've got is that the DTN cash cattle equivalent for this morning, DTN early word, says that fat cattle should be, what was it, Eric? I should have looked. It was, it was 240.80. And I've talked to DTN, and that's not what fat cattle should be bringing. That's if the people who finish cattle were making as much money as the meat packers are, that's what our cattle would be worth. A lot of this equipment would move today if we had 240 fat cattle.
240.80.
240.80. Thanks for verifying that. So I think we all know what the problems are, but I guess that's what I think of. I'm from central South Dakota. We've got a little feedlot. We're already getting calls on, can you feed cows? Can you feed 3-weight calves? Because it just gets progressively worse as you go on north. So that's what I've got. I'll turn it over.
Okay, I want to ask Brett a question. Brett deals with a lot of producers from North Dakota, South Dakota, and Nebraska, as he's a regional director for RCAF. And most of you are pretty aware of the drought situation up in North Dakota, and I know that Brett's been getting a lot of calls, from producers who things are really tough up there, and there's a lot of dispersions. There's some barns running sales twice a week just for cows and pairs. And so, Brett, when we see regions like that, North Dakota, the extreme northeast, the extreme northwest and southwest in drought situations, and more cows going to town, what is the likelihood that those producers are going to build back, or that those producers will come back at all right now under these market conditions?
Well, I mean, that's the thing. Since 2014, it's been so skinny. We've had small hits and big losses, and we haven't been able to put any fat on our bones. Now, don't look at me, but I'm talking financially, right? Financially, we've just been so hollowed out to where rural America and the ranchers that sustain it are just treading water. So yeah, that's my greatest fear. I mean, the greatest problem we have is that we don't have enough swing sets in rural America anymore. We're having trouble bringing our young people back to take over. Because everybody calls me a young guy. I'm 49, and I'm a young guy in this business. So I don't know. I mean, one of the things, the guy that called me about having some three-way calves fed, he said, I don't know who to call. There's no backgrounders left. None that you can trust. Maybe guys that are going to try and rent an empty yard. So, tough deal.
Yeah, and it's interesting when Brett talks about the sweet sets that are disappearing in rural America, because most of us that sit here in this grandstands and are familiar with this area know that there's a school just down Highway 183 at Taylor that our state senators have to fight to stay open because the census is so low, and you know, we're having to try to keep the doors open on some of these schools. So with that, I'm going to have Matt Lowery come up because his perspective is interesting as he deals with both seed stock producers and commercial cattle producers in the stands at his sales and where he markets cattle, and so he hears it from both sides, and I'm anxious to have him report on what he hears from producers he deals with.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being here today, and it's a pleasure being asked to do this. You know, I see it completely on a different level, because when we market things, and especially from the registered side of that, we market things to an extremely high level. And you see it, and I see many faces that are here in this crowd that I see on a day in, day out basis at some of these livestock sales, or especially on the registered side of it. And as far as what you producers have done, and I'll say this, and kudos to guys like Shane and these guys that market the absolute best product in the world, and how we market our cattle. We can't do any better. And kudos to South Dakota, Nebraska, in this area, from the health protocols to the value-added programs. I think as producers, I think we've done an excellent job. I think there is some opportunities out there. I really do invite all of you to step up and look and see what some of these value-added programs are, because there are some things that are out there that we can add value to the bottom line. But right now, and I think not just the whole industry that I think that we're worried about is environmental right now. And environmental is probably the biggest fear in what everybody's mind right now. You know, we might get by this year. What's next year going to be like? You know, as we go back and we come out of the drought in 2012, the cattle market was not that bad. And we were pretty lucky in 2012 and going in 13 and 14. You know, we did lose some cows, and we darn sure trimmed the numbers pretty hard. But it's a little scary right now. Our margins of profit, there is none. There is none right now. Nobody's making any money. Nobody. The man raising them, the man feeding them, the guy that's making the money right now is the man killing them. And not to throw them under the bus, we need them too. We need them too, but we need to figure out how to share a piece of this pie just a little bit differently than what we're doing right now. But it's a really scary position that we're in right now. And I'd like to paint a real pretty picture of what's coming, but we got to figure some things out in what's going on. And I don't exactly have all the answers, but I know just a few individuals can't do this alone, and I do know that.
I have a question for you, Matt. So as you work with a lot of seed stock producers, tell me what the conversation is among those registered breeders. Are they at all concerned that there's going to start being less commercial cattlemen in seeds buying bulls? Are they seeing it coming that this fight is at their back door too?
Well, as we look at the registered sector or the purebred industry, you have to remember this. Whatever happens in the commercial industry, approximately 2 to 3 years later, it is felt by the registered guy. And as we well know, most commercial producers receive some sort of COVID assistance in some manner. And the one thing I love about the registered industry is there's very few things that a commercial guy will get to do and spend money and like it. And buying bulls is one of them. I get to be a part of that every day, so it's fun. So there was a lot of money floating around this spring. And so as far as the registered guy, he's not felt this yet. Do I believe that some of these registered guys are going to feel this? You know, we're going to feel feed shortages. We're going to feel some other things. Are they going to sell less bulls next year? Probably not. and and for some way, shape, or form, that's just kind of the way it goes. And I saw a statistic a year ago and this was put out by the American Angus Association. 2014 through 2020, there was 28% more Angus bulls out there than what there was in 2014. So the registered sector of this has really grown, and we're still marketing now. Are they taking more of a market share? Maybe so. I'm not here to say this breed's better than the next one, because I represent a lot of people and all over the country and in different operations and different environments. And so there's many parts of that that's going to be different. But I do think that it is coming, and we have to, on a percentage. I mean, if we look at the numbers here a year from now at Bassett Livestock, and how many head of cattle have we sold this year versus next year, if that number goes up on a percentage basis, as a registered producer, that's probably that many less bulls that's going to be put back into the marketplace. And those are just some of the things that we see, but nobody's thinking about. But I know me personally, this fall, I've got more female dispersions and more herd reductions this fall than I've ever had. So it is on their mind. It is on their mind. It's definitely on everybody's mind.
Yeah, and even if we study current 2020 fourth quarter numbers and 2021 first quarter numbers, saw record cow slaughter and heifer slaughter since, I think, the highest number since 2010. So that trend of losing females out of the domestic cow herd is accelerating. Okay, Shane, I'd like you to come up, and you once again represent consigners and buyers. You get buyers coming in out of Iowa to chase after these good calves. And so tell us about the conversations that you hear from your customers on both sides.
Well, thanks for having me. Depleted, broke, the kid that goes to school and gets his butt kicked every day and just keeps going back and doing it. And that's not just from my cow-calf guys, that's our yearling guys. And I'm the one that has to call most of them guys, the buyers, to get them here. Jake or I do, and it's tough because there's nobody making any money on the other end, just like Matt said, all the way to fat. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about how this market works that I didn't understand before I got in sale barn business. So when I was 15, 20 years ago when I joined RCAP, I was just about fixing the cow-calf guy. Well, I got into the sale barn business, and you realize that we're not going to fix the cow-calf side of this until we fix the fat cattle market. There's no negotiated cash. So here's what happens. So John Doe from Iowa comes out here next week, and we have 7,000 head of cattle. And if he wants to buy some steers to put in his pen, he's got to bid against a house full of people and all these order buyers that are carrying an order for about every class of calf, plus from quite a few people. And then we're also on Cattle USA. So every time we turn that on, I don't think in my 7 years here we've ever turned Cattle USA on. There wasn't at least 30 people that were qualified to bid that we'd approved at Bassett Livestock. There's hundreds of others that are watching, but then people have interest in buying and a lot of times do bid. So John Doe buys these steers, and he takes them back to Iowa, and he feeds them for 5 months, 7 months, or sometimes a year if he comes out here and buys a small fall calf. And when they're fat, you know how many people he's got to sell them to? Not very damn many. If he's a big one, maybe there's 2 or 3 guys that's got interest. If he's a small feed yard, he can't even get them. He can't even get anybody to show up and put a bid in. So what does he do? He calls the packer on a Monday morning, and it's getting hot and it's humid, and he's got some big steers, and he's afraid he's going to lose some of them if he don't get them shipped. So he says, "Well, what can I get out of my steers today?" And the guy's like, "Oh, I don't know. We don't need them very bad. You know, we're pretty well bought up for the next month. I suppose we could give you 114." And the guy's like, "Geez, he's paying 117 on Friday." And he says, "Well, I know, but we just really don't need them. So here's what we can do. You know, we'll give you 114. You got an hour to make up your mind, and we'll take them by Friday." So the guy thinks about it, talks to his wife. He's like, "Shoot, it's getting hot. We're going to lose some cattle. We got to do it." So he takes 114. What happens to the neighbor down the road? He's calling in about the same time. And the buyer's like, shoot, 114, that's what John Doe took. We don't really need the cattle. So boom, the whole United States fat cattle market is set right there on a Monday morning in Iowa. And I'm not blaming them guys in Iowa. Don't get me wrong. They're in a bad spot. I'm using Iowa. It could be eastern South Dakota, Nebraska. They're in a bad spot. So boom, there's the market. Well, the other 80% of the cattle that are not negotiated cash are some form of formula that is based on them cattle that just sold. So there it is. It's over for the week. And that's the problem. To me, there's got to be we've got to fix the fat cattle market before we can help it. It's going to help any of you guys, because I'm here to tell you, them guys buying your calves and been buying them the last 4 or 5 years ain't making any damn money either. We've already talked about where it's going. The $1,000+ a head's going to the guy that owned them for 14 days and kills them. And I'm not here to stomp on him either. Just like Matt said, we have to have him. And I'm not so sure if I wasn't in his position, I wouldn't do the same damn thing. If you can get away with it, you know, their job is to make money for the people that are in their company and buy stock in their company. So I don't know that you can blame them, but we have to do something to fix that part of it.
So you're a small business owner in a rural community, and you know the business side of marketing cattle too. So talk to me about these businesses in rural Nebraska, rural South Dakota, rural America, that we all feed out of this fat cattle trough. And if the money can't come down, we can't bring money to town. And so talk about how this will affect all businesses in rural America. It is affecting.
Yeah, it already has. This has been going on. Paul Engler, which come from here, many of you know who he is, Cactus Feeders. He bought his first cattle in Bassett Livestock when I believe he told me he was 11. Maybe he was 9, I don't remember. But he used to work there, and he come in back, bought 100 and some head of cattle, didn't have the money to pay for them. They got that deal figured out. But anyway, he went on to be a big deal. And he told me, he said, it's my fault. I'm the first one to do it. I'm the one, to come up with the formula. And he said it was the right thing to do for me at the time. He said, I would have never, I don't know that he said I would have never done it, but he said, I did not know that it would get this bad, that it would all go that way. So back to what you were talking about. So since we come off the high in 15, wasn't it? 14, 15. So fat cattle just dropped like a rock, feeders down every year, to where the last 2-3 years, everybody that sold a calf off the cow, unless you had a pretty dang big one, has been at a loss in the fall. You can't run a cow for that. So what has that done to small town America? You can see as my most favorite thing about my job is everywhere I get to go. It's from here to pretty much the Wyoming border, maybe not quite there, but up into South Dakota ways, been south and east. But I just love Sandhills and small town America. And I was thinking about this last night. When you drive around these small towns, how many new businesses do you see? How many new buildings do you see? Not very dang many. Might see a new bank on the highway. That's it. And so it's already took its toll. So when these people out here are raising a calf for a year and selling it, and just coming up with enough money to maybe give to the bank to get by another year, they're going to get by with the pickup they drove. They're going to get by with the equipment they had. Probably wear the same jeans and boots that they had. Like Matt said, to COVID, I think everybody got a little of that, and that put a little boost into the economy out here. But for the most part, that's how it's went. There's been no improvement to rural America because of what's going on. Corporate America is stealing it all.
I have lost my grocery store in Ansley, Nebraska within the last 5 years. Loop City Livestock has went out of business, so I've lost a local auction barn down there, and this is going to continue until we get loud with our legislators. This isn't just a cattle industry problem. This is a rural America problem. And so now I'm going to have Eric Nelson come up, and he's that Iowa cattle feeder Shane talked about, and I don't know that he's got a very rosy picture to paint here. So.
Desperately need them.
Well, thanks for having me here today. Yeah, Shane really set this up pretty well. I'm from 200 miles straight east of here. I farm and feed cattle, and we're ranchers in Iowa. There aren't a lot of ranchers, but we've got a calf operation there too. But we live right off Highway 20, just 200 miles east of here. I married a Nebraska girl 32 years ago from southern Nebraska, and she has 41 first cousins, and I'm looking in the stands here. I'll run into one of them yet today somewhere. So it's always great to come to Nebraska. I have a brother-in-law and family that rants down by Anselmo, and so we get out this way pretty frequent. But you know, our cow operation we've added in the last 30 years, and really my life mission became when we bought those to try to get the performance and to have those cattle measure up to the good cattle that we buy out in this part of the world and west, and the cattle that we feed, which is, you know, another couple thousand versus what we raise, has been our normal program. But unless something changes here in the next couple months, that's going to change drastically. And Shane referred to that, and I visit with a lot of my friends regularly. My phone has been really busy the last 3 months, and I call that the misery index. When the misery index gets high, my phone rings, and that's part of being a director with RCAF. And by the way, I represent Iowa and Minnesota and Wisconsin, and as tough as it is in western Iowa to sell slaughter cattle, eastern Iowa is worse. It's really terrible. They really rely on auction markets there, and they have great auction markets, but the buyers have been very inconsistent in showing up, and they'll have a couple thousand slaughter cattle at a barn on a day when there's no buyers that show up. And so it's been really, really tough. But, you know, and I don't want to just spend a lot of time talking about problems, but it'll lead to some solutions. But the slaughter cattle market is really broken when dual messages are sent the same minute from the same market. So, you know, I just checked the AM box beef prices here this morning. They're at $331.51. So box beef has fallen back a little bit from the highs. But if we had corresponding cash cattle prices today that we did in 2015, we would have $212 fats live. In early 2015, we had $265 box beef and $1.70 fats. And so, especially with the feed prices that we have today, to try to turn around, and I think we've had some 124 paid, a small amount already this week. With feed where it's at, it's really tough to make that happen. So you have, you know, the box beef market is sending messages that we need more. And in fact, in some grocery stores, the guy behind the meat counter in these urban areas, they're telling people that there's a shortage. There isn't enough beef. And at the same time, the cash market is telling guys to cut back and telling ranchers to sell cows. In a functioning market, you cannot get those two messages at the exact same time out of a functioning market. And so that's the bad news. And it usually takes things to get really bad before things can get fixed. And that's why right now there are so many suggestions that have come from cattle organizations, from elected officials to try to fix things. And I know from where I'm at, selling of cattle in the last 6 years has really gotten difficult, and the number of bids has gone down. The captive supplies that are being used have made it really difficult. Last week, 80% of the cattle in the country that were slaughtered were formula cattle, and those cattle brought $4 a hundred more than the cash negotiated cattle, and they weighed 124 pounds less, which also tells us that the guys with the formula agreements are able to market their cattle in a timely basis. What's really killing us guys east of here is that we're having to sell cattle 30 to 60 days on feed longer than what we normally would. And so we delivered a group of heifers to Schuyler last week that were calves that were placed last year on the 1st of November, and they go 93% choice and prime and only bring back 25 cents over the grid base because they were so fat, and they needed to have gone at least 30 days ago, but we don't have that opportunity. And then you throw in there the loss of bids that we've had. One of the majors, back in our country is Tyson, and the plant in Dakota City is nearly all captive supply driven now, and so just sporadically bidding at all. Nebraska Beef in Omaha has been hooked up with one feedlot since the first of the year, and will be until here the end of this month, and then we'll see if they renew or not. But I've had half as many bids the last 6 months as what we normally would. And I know there was a study done by Congress in 2019, and this sounds pretty silly, but when there are fewer bids, prices are less. And it took a congressional study to point that out, but it is a good point. And that's really what the guys to the east face. You get into Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, and they maybe have one bid, and a lot of times they get to pay the freight back to Greater Omaha in order to get those cattle slaughtered. And so if someone would, and I'm going to take the question away from Karina, it would ask me, what is it going to take for me to enter into the fray in buying some feeder cattle to place this fall? I would say I need to see 50-14, 50% cash negotiated, delivered in 14 days. I need to see that in place in order for me to go to my banker and say, I really believe in, be able to look him in the eye and tell him that I believe that I can, I have enough upside opportunity the next go around. And so right now, that's what I've been fighting on here for some months, and will continue to.
Okay, so while we still have Eric up here, some of you may have heard about a big cattle industry meeting that happened in Phoenix about a month ago, where all the big cattle producer organizations had representatives there. Well, I am standing next to a man who was there. He represented RCAF, and so I wanted Eric to give his perspective of what happened at that meeting and let you guys all know.
All right, great question. So leading up to that meeting, we those of us at RCAF weren't sure. Is it going to be worth the trouble? I mean, it was the 10th of May back in our part of the world. It seems like maybe not everything is happening that can in a year's time, but almost everything. But we went ahead and we pushed forward, and there were 3 others, RCAF president and 2 other directors joined me. And it was representatives from American Farm Bureau, LMA, National Farmers Union, NCBA, USCA, and RCAF. And it was really constructive. And we constructed a list, and I'm sure that you've probably seen the list of problems that we prioritized, and then there was an action list. But and I'm not going to bore you with all the details, but number 1 on the problem list was packer concentration, and the power that comes with the concentration amongst the four packers, and I want to expand on that just a little bit, because what's really risky, one of the action items was for us to promote small and regional packing companies, and I think that's a great proposal. But if concentration of the big 4 is left not dealt with, it's very easy for the regional packers to basically draft like cars on a NASCAR racetrack behind other cars in front of them, and figure out what the big guys are doing and profit handsomely from that. And so we're still going to have to deal with packer concentration, and it was identified by the group out there as one of the important issues. One issue that I do think can be a game changer that's on the action item list, and it has to do with mandatory price reporting. And I know in Senator Fisher here in Nebraska has a piece of legislation that talks about adding a contract library that's made public so we can see what some of these formula agreements are. And that's a decent proposal, but it's not good enough. I want it to be real time, and that's actually what came out of that Phoenix meeting. Is that, and it was approved by everybody there, that all of these non-fixed price agreements that now don't have to be reported until the time the cattle are slaughtered would have to be reported at the time the agreements are entered into. And whatever those details are at the time the agreement is made, if it's 6 months in advance, a year in advance, 3 years in advance, those details would have to be reported, because right now, it's my opinion that there are maybe thousands of different formula agreements in use out there, and nobody knows what those agreements are. Even the formula feeders themselves. And I think it will be, it would, to not have those non-priced agreements reported would be like if Shane would turn the lights off on his marquee reporting weights and prices at the sale barn, and then we would have to sit there and guess on all the details of the cattle sold. And that's never going to happen there. And I think that's just a minimum that we need to demand. And it was agreed by everyone in that Phoenix meeting. And I know the LMR law needs to be approved by the end of September, and I'm hopeful that we can get that done already this summer and have that be part of it.
Okay, so now we're going to go on to a new round of questions, and we're going to talk about what are the action items, the reforms that need to happen in this cattle industry for us to return profitability back to the producers. And so, Brett, I'll have you come up and talk about your opinion on that.
Well, I guess the number one thing in my mind, in order, number one is MCOOL, because it's common sense. It creates the bridge between the consumer and the producer, and it leaves the packer out of that conversation for the first time. And it can happen really fast, because one thing that's happening in Washington right now is we're getting over this World Trade Organization thing. I've asked them for years when I've talked to them, when are you going to respect me as a veteran and a cattle producer as much as you respect the World Trade Organization? And they can't answer it. So for me, that's the one that could happen almost immediately. That's as close as we have to a silver bullet. Number two, and it creates competition for American beef. It lets us compete. What does your sale barn run on, Shane? Competition, right? Competition in the truth. You get to see the cattle, you know how many they are, they know how much they weigh, you know what the bid is. So MCOOL is just, it's impossibly hard to argue with, and I think it's coming really soon, if everybody makes the calls. Keep the heat on them. They don't like it. They count every call. Number two, like Eric said, is 50-14. People, which I guess I should explain 50-14, that's 50% of the transactions have to be in the open market, 14-day delivery, plant by plant. So again, we go back to the way Shane runs his sale barn. How many cattle are competed for every sale at your sale barn?
Almost all of them, unless it's gone 3 legs or
100%, other than the cutbacks that just fade away. So 50-14 isn't too much to ask, and I think that we have some tremendous momentum behind that too. I think more than the ag media, who I would maybe call the fake news, will let you know. Not you, Ron. And the last one, I'll just hit them briefly and then we can expand upon them, is the checkoff referendum. That's something that every one of us here can do. The checkoff was a great idea when it was put in place back then. You know, the story that I hear is that it was ranchers that were seeing poor prices that wanted to kick in a buck and promote their product and try and raise demand for beef to make more money for cattle. But as it always goes, by the time it gets through Washington, D.C., the sausage maker, it gets watered down and it becomes pretty ineffective, and it's just decayed over the years. So I say that if the checkoff as we know it goes entirely away, it will be because of its inability or its unwillingness to change. Because a lot of us have been really unhappy for a long time. And maybe the greatest illustration of that, the most recent illustration, is when Senator Rounds from South Dakota and Senator Smith from Minnesota sent that great letter to the DOJ asking them specific questions about our cattle markets and why producers and consumers were being harmed. And North American Meat Institute, who receives checkoff money, comes out with a letter circulating it through Washington. We might not have even known that letter was going around if we hadn't been working with Senator Rounds' office. And they said everything's fine. This is a normal market. Nothing to see here, folks. Move along. Your dollars. Think about this. When you sell cattle the next time at Bassett Livestock, pay that check off with $1 bills. Write your name on it. And then when the check off spends that money, you should get to look at it and see where your dollar specifically went. Because it could be going to a cause to directly antagonistic to your cause, and you have to pay into it. So I guess that's what I've got.
And I'll recap those things. So Matt, you want to come up next and talk about what reforms you think our industry needs?
This is going to be pretty easy. All of you know how I make my living in competitive markets. It is true price discovery. End of story. Without true price discovery and without more than 2 people on the seats to bid on cattle, we don't have a market. End of story. It is that easy. And none of us are immune to it. And I don't care which organization you belong to. Whatever you believe is right, it doesn't make any difference. If you belong to this organization or this organization or this organization, I don't care. It doesn't make any difference. None of us are immune to this without competition. End of story. You have no competition. We have no feeder cattle market next week at Bassett Livestock Market. We have no competition. You're not selling fat cattle. End of story. It's this easy. And we're the only thing that's out there that I know of that is being sold without competition. And think about that. You have no competition. We have no competition here. You know what? We're going to walk around. We're going to buy all the equipment we want to. There's no competition. It's that easy. It's really that simple. You know, and Brett, and I hate following Brett because he hits on everything so well and he's so well versed in this that he kind of makes all the rest of us look bad. But, you know, in terms of the checkoff, I believe this. I believe in promotion of the product. I really do. I also believe if it's used in the right manner, it's a really good thing. And so you have to question all of these things, you know. With everything in the industry, if it was done honestly and fairly, we probably wouldn't be in this position that we're in right now. End of story. You know, if everybody is concerned, if we're concerned about the producer, we're concerned about the feeder, we're concerned about the consumer, this is a good thing. We're in a good industry, and we're still in a good industry, but we got some work to do. And I think that there's a lot of things going on, and Shane and I were talking about this a couple nights ago. I think one of the problems right now within the industry that we're seeing is we're trying to flock shoot everything. We got so many things going on right now within the industry. We need to pick one. We need to pick our biggest problem right now. And as an industry, I don't care which organization you belong to, I don't care who your daddy is or where you came from or how you make your money. If you're in this cattle industry, we need to pick one thing. And we need to fix it. We need to fix one thing at a time because we've spread ourselves out so thin and we all have different ideas and what we should do, and we should do this, and we should do this, and we should do this. And as you talk to, you know, and you go throughout this crowd, and if you poll this entire crowd of people, everybody thinks about different ways how they can fix this. We can become more profitable if we do this. We can become more profitable if we do this. We need, as an industry, not an organization, as an industry, we need to fix this problem and whatever it is. And right now, I think the biggest one is competition, lack of competition. End of story. If we take care of our competition issues, all of a sudden everybody else, all the way down from when we talked about small communities, everything, we have some competition, all of a sudden everybody's got a little cash in their pocket. We're able to do some things. We're able to fight the other things that go on with it.
Excellent. I think I've got a summary here at the end. You just painted a picture for me, and I'll let Shane go next.
I'm on board with just what these guys said. I was so excited when the Livestock Marketing Association had that secret meeting because we were actually at a Nebraska LMA meeting in Crawford on Sunday, and I brought it up. I was like, you know, we sit here and we argue about the same dang thing since I've been in this. And none of us going to make a crap in a year anyway, unless we fix the market. So we formed our own little committee in Nebraska. Boy, I found out 2 days later we had a big meeting about this. And so I was super excited about that. Get all 5 groups together. When they do push forward with whatever it is, I just encourage everybody, no matter what group you belong to, and us as well, to stay open-minded. It's a lot like politics. And there's going to be a few things in there that we're not going to like. That's just how politics work. But we've got to all go together this time. We do, to fix this fat cow market. And I'm with you. Country boards and labeling, huge, huge. But I'm like Matt too. We got to, we just have had so many problems coming at us in this industry. I mean, we haven't even talked about the fake meat yet. You know, I mean, we're just fighting on every front, but we have to focus on one or two, like Matt said. And I guess to me, negotiated cash and contribution liability are big. I could go on for a long time, but.
Okay, Eric, do you want to come back and recap any of the reforms?
Just to kind of bookend things, you know, being the Corn Belt, the more center of the Corn Belt guy here, you know, we used to raise hogs. I was down in Oklahoma in 1995, and I worked in the seed business full time at that time. And I come up over a rise north of Guyman, Oklahoma, about 10 miles, and I was blinded by all of the reflection of all the new steel hog buildings that had been built down there. And went to the top of the hill, called my brother on the telephone, commodity broker, and told him that the hog market, it's over. The hog industry, I mean, it was unbelievable. As far as I could see were seaboard hog buildings. And then I went down into Guyman, and sure enough, there's a big seaboard plant. Went home, we sold sows mid-year that year for 55 cents a pound, and within a couple years, you know, we had 8-cent hogs. And fast forward to today, there's hog buildings all around me. I don't know who owns them. I can't converse with the people that take care of the hogs because they don't speak English. And they're great workers, they are. I mean, they're great folks. I don't know anything about it. But what I do know, and well, on top of that, the purebred hog industry went away in a matter of a couple of years once it integrated. And I do know that we're facing a similar fate if we don't turn some of these things around. And back to the Phoenix meeting, the president of American Farm Bureau, Zippy Duval, was one of the participants. And in his introduction, he said that he and his two boys run about 450 commercial cows. And of course, it doesn't sound as good because I don't have that Georgia drawl. And then he said that they're also contract broiler finishers. And then he hesitated and he said, heaven help us all in the cattle industry if the cattle industry goes the way that the chickens have. And I think that he was spot on, and that's kind of my call to action. We can help decide how this industry looks moving forward, but we've got to step up.
Well, then I'm just going to keep you up here, and we're going to go to the next question, because what are we facing if we don't get some of these reforms? If we don't get more competition for our fat cattle, if we don't get more competition for our American beef, or a promotion program that serves the American cattle producer, what is the future of this industry?
Well, I know several, I'm friends with several bankers besides the ones that I deal with, and their misery index is high right now back our way as well, and they've been asking that same question, and it still comes down, you know, beauty lies in the eye of the lien holder, and as good as I'm only as good as how much equity I have, and I think that that's all in question, and it's really in question how much equity do we want to continue to risk. And so again, I believe that without some pretty demonstrative action here in the next couple months before the fall cattle run, that there's going to be a lot of problem. So
Thanks. I think I did a hot barn a couple of weeks ago, 150 days till the fall run, and now we're down to 90 days. The heat is on. Brett, you want to come up and talk about the future of the industry if we don't get some of these reforms?
I guess my brother and I, we've got a feedlot, we've got a cow calf, so we get to touch every piece of this industry other than cutting them up and putting them on a plate. And we've had an invitation to the big dance. We had a major packer that owned a major feedlot at the time come and try to buy yearlings right off of our place. And I had no intention of selling them to them, and I think that became apparent, and it made them pretty upset in the end. But they told us that, if you need calves to feed, we put out a ton of calves. And so what is that? When you deal with those guys, they come in, they don't ask you what your hay is worth, they tell you what your hay is worth. They don't ask you what your yardage is, they tell you what your yardage is. You're no longer going to buy your gates and your supplements and everything in town. You're going to build a loading dock, and we're going to send a truck once a month. And I mean, if you need continuous panels or whatever, you just put in the order, and they're going to be $50 cheaper than you're going to go out here to the farm show and buy them. That's vertical integration, and that's where we're headed. People say that the cow-calf industry can't be vertically integrated. The hell it can't. When your market goes away, you're caught. If it keeps going, Shane's done. What's the old saying? Nobody goes to the country to pay more, right?
Never do.
What do they need Shane for? They hate competition. Shane's all about competition. And so that's what I see happening. Just like Eric knows what it's like to wait for that call. And you better make up your mind in a hurry. They'll buy light calves the same way they buy fat cattle. So that's what I see coming.
You know, Brett and I have talked about this before. Why do we stay in it? Well, it's muscle memory. We all put on our boots every morning and head out to go, check windmills, put up hay, do all of that. And are we willing to do it for somebody who's going to tell us how to do it and what resources to do it with? Or are we going to fight to stay independent and run our operations the way that we want to? So Shane, why don't you come up here and talk about the future? If we don't get some of these reforms, what's the future of Bassett Livestock?
I think Brett just touched on it, but without fixing this fat cattle market in the very near future, and just what's been talked about, the fall run's not far away. Nobody's made any money. The small farmer feeder, the small feedlot has not made any money in a long time. The bank's not gonna go along with it. So when you broke the last of the small farmer feeders, they're not here in the barn anymore. So what happens then? Big feed yards, corporate feed yards, and they have a card that they put out on Monday that says you can give $1.22 for an 800-pound heifer, and that's it. That's it. There's no emotion in the corporate side of it. There is in the small farmer feeder that comes out here. When he sees something he likes and he's an auction, he's going to give a little more for it. The corporates don't. So when that day comes, it's already gone the way of the hogs and the chickens. It's already happened at that point, because then you do not have the competition. Past that, I don't know. I don't know how they line it up. I don't want to think about it, because I don't want it to go there. I want to fix this thing, and this is our last chance to do it in my mind.
Okay, Matt, if you want to come up and talk about what your crystal ball shows you.
Stepping inside of Matt's head's a dangerous thing. On a personal basis, I've been doing this for 25 years. I've been selling a lot of cattle. Millions, literally millions of cattle I've sold behind the microphone. Never have I ever been this scared. Now, not only as an auctioneer, I'm out of job, okay? So I don't have an auction income. This takes place, I don't have a cow herd. What am I going to do with a ranch? How am I going to make a living? I'm really, really lucky for the fact is I do have supplemental income. And I've kind of modified things where I can make it work. That's me. That's not everybody. But it's and like Shane said, it is time. If you don't believe it's not, I know we are the hardest, most resilient, strongest people in the world. Period. We're also some of the greatest people in the world. We're humble, we're kind, and we work hard. That's what this country was built on, was the morals and values that sit right here in front of me. But every once in a while, it's time to just get tough and just call it the way it is. Call it a spade a spade. They are not for you. They are not for us. They are out for themselves. They can steal another load of fat cattle. It doesn't matter. And I've said it before, we need them in this. They don't care. They don't care if you lose your house. They don't care whether your kids go without. They don't care about all the rest of this. So when you go home tonight, you look around and you drive through your cows and you look around and you figure out how bad you want it and how bad you want to keep it. It's not a pretty picture, and it's real. We're all next week and here this next month. We're going to go up to Bassett Livestock, and most of you are local guys. We're all going to get along. We're all going to be okay. We're all going to go up to that brick building on the corner, and the banker's going to say, well, you did kind of okay, you know, compared to everybody else. They brought what the neighbors did. It ain't enough. It ain't enough. It hasn't been enough for a long time. And we've accepted it. We've accepted mediocrity because we have been beat down and beat down and beat down and beat down. We got one more fight. If it doesn't take place, it doesn't take place. But we got one more fight. And I think the whole reason that all of us are here is, and I said this before, I don't care what organization you belong to. I don't care if you believe in this organization or you don't believe in, and we're fighting this or this or this or this. We're down to one thing. We've lost all competition in the marketplace. I guarantee every one of you would be mad as hell next week if we went into that sale barn who sold cattle here next week, and I crawled behind the microphone and somebody hollered out the price, and you know what? You sold your cattle. That's what Eric feels like week in and week out. We've lived on competition. We're lucky for the fact is that sometimes it's not enough. We've lost our competition. It's time to get it back. Look at your families, look at your ranches, look at your cow herds, and think about the people that came before you. It's time to dig deep one last time.
So a couple of things that I want to wrap up with before we open up for some questions. In one of those, we've obviously heard the word competition a million times today, and as all these guys have talked, it started to put into my mind the illustration of a three-legged milk stool. And we're not saying that any one thing is the magic bullet, but if you think of one leg of the stool as 50-14, creating competition for our fat cattle, one leg of the stool being getting our beef labeled, reinstating mandatory country of origin labeling, so we're creating competition for our American cattle, our American beef, because you and I all know that if a housewife walks into the grocery store to buy a package of beef, if she was given the information to make an informed decision, I think she's going to choose us every time. And then the third leg of that stool is having a promotion program that does serve the American rancher and isn't putting money into lobbying organizations that are directly lobbying against us. And so you can use that illustration of a three-legged milk stool kind of as where to prioritize. And so I'll go ahead and open it up for questions. Anybody have questions for these guys? Maybe they ought to come stand up here and get in the firing line with me. Oh, we got one down here. Shout it out.
I'd be the guy that would do that. But I did.
He asked, where do the Nebraska senators and even Nebraska congressmen stand on the round Smith letter? Fisher, Sass, and Congressman Smith. None of them. He is exactly right. None of them would sign on to that round Smith letter. It was an excellent letter. It was the most detailed letter that we have ever seen come out of any congressional offices, pinpointing the problems and providing some solutions. And you're right. So we got to make the calls. We got to keep being loud. We got to keep speaking for ourselves, because if we think that we're being represented in D.C. by any lobbyists, I don't think they pay their taxes in Rock County. I don't think that they have hay to put up out here. We got to keep speaking for ourselves. Do you have anything else to add before I walk away?
I'll guarantee you the packer out of the model for these guys. They're back in full swing. They were already planning. I'll guarantee it. They were losing $200 to $300 a head. It was being talked about back then. They're right. We're going to consolidate if we don't do something about it.
Yep, consolidation is coming if we don't do something about it. Eric?
Yeah, just to expand on that round Smith letter, for anybody that's not aware, Senator Rounds from South Dakota and Senator Smith from Minnesota did a great job of really expanding on how the consumer is being harmed as well. You know, that the reason that the packing industry has been allowed to consolidate is this efficiency model that they're more efficient by being larger. Well, the last 2 years, this efficiency model has kind of gotten pretty well blown up when I have side dump load after side dump load of euthanized market hogs that come from Worthington, Minnesota to the rendering works in Sioux City, because in their uber efficient model, they don't have any ability to have any bumps in the road, right? And now the consumer is paying for that, and where it's really noticeable is in hogs. It's unbelievable. Market hogs are worth more than cattle, but you go in the grocery store and beef is 4 times higher than pork. And I got all kinds of people asking me that all the time. But the efficiency model is what's really allowed the packing industry to consolidate, and it's the sheets have been pulled back on that, and we can all see that it was efficiency of profits for the packers, but the consumer isn't getting the benefit, clearly.
Excellent. Does anybody else want to comment on any of that?
I don't have an answer why they didn't. I called both of them. I called our senators and asked why they weren't, but I didn't get a reply. So I don't know.
What did they say then? When
You don't get to talk to them. You get to talk to a recording, Bernard, or you get to talk to or either that or somebody that works for it. They do call back sometimes. They did not this time.
What can we do to get the consumers and the non-producers to understand that they're getting hit too, and how they can speak out to help us?
Excellent question. So she asked, what can we do to get the consumers and the non-producers to join the fight with us? And that's to make them aware that if they don't join the fight with us, it's probably not going to be our beef in the store anymore. That they're going to continue to source cheaper, cheaper cattle from, or bring in beef on a boat from somewhere else, and they're going to control the price at the grocery store. And so there's, we have to involve every consumer we know in making the calls, sending the emails, and fighting for this nation's food security, because if it does, it becomes an absolute food security issue.
I'll let you in on a little inside information. Down the track of answering that question, Karina would not let me bring my pitchfork today. What we've got here today is a pretty small gathering, but in my mind, I hope that this starts more gatherings just like this one, because as we talk about the fake news media, they pick what they want to cover, guys. And I'm not saying that we need to be violent out here in cattle country, but we need to be seen and we need to be heard. And it starts with the phone calls. Even if you get an answering machine, they count that call. Hey, I'm Joe Bob. I'm for MCool. Click. Or if you want to call and talk to them for an hour, you got to make the calls. I had it in my phone. That congressional switchboard number. You got to make the calls. Put it in your phone. Call them while you're cutting hay. Do whatever. But silence is consent, and that's what the other side relies on. That we'll be quiet. One of the first coins made in this country was mind your business. Not mind your own business, mind your business. And that's what we have to do. I mean, we have businesses, the packers are a business, we've got to stand our ground. And we've got to be peaceful about it, but we've got to be firm all the same. Dave?
I was going to say, in Nebraska, we have a law on the books right now. It's a ban on packer ownership that Cap Dirks passed back in the late 90s. And Cap had told me that if you sell your product in that vertical integration, you're shooting yourself in the foot. And Cap got it passed, and it isn't no 50-14, isn't a 20-14, isn't an 80-14, it's 14. Period. That's the law on the books. Tatum and Cap talked to South Dakota and Iowa and Missouri and Kansas. Tatum Lee called me the other day and said that law's still on the Kansas books as well. I'll bet it's still on Iowa's books. And I'll bet it's still in South Dakota's. If you can't get any movement out of these federal legislators, then you go put the screws to your local legislators, because they'll do just what they did to Cap when he passed price look a hell of a lot better than 0 pork meat.
That's a good point, Dave. And I mean, another thing is too, talk to your state legislators, because they might have a hotter line into DC than you have. It takes all the above, but you have to make some noise. Because I'll tell you something, nobody's told you, maybe ever or in a really long time, you do a hell of a job. You really do. This whole show is about the cattle producers in America. And I don't know, they keep chipping at us, like somebody alluded to the war on beef. We're facing a lot of headwinds, but we have to have some self-confidence in ourselves, and we've got to fight for what we've got and fight for a competitive system, because where there is no competition, there is no capitalism.
Talking about state level legislation. Okay, go ahead.
I'm an older fella that used to feed cattle. Somebody told me once, they said, I'm about 80 years old, and I fed cattle in the 50s, in the 60s and 70s. They said, by year such and such, there will be no more farm feeder cattle. And I thought, what's that? Whatever. Blank word. And they tell me what I'm going to do. It's exactly what one of these guys said. They come out and they said, we don't even want to come to your place anymore, because we can go to Foxley's and we can buy 3 times as many. I think I had one potluck of cattle to sell. He said, you and I fought around for an hour discussing. But what he did say, he said, I'll tell you what I'll give you. I'll give it to you 2 weeks from now. I said, no, this is the problem, guys, that I'm not a speaker, I'm not enough. But I'll guarantee you, if this would have been took a hold at that point in time, and I know 2 or 3 other people fed down Marshall, and they bought them right as soon as they drove in the yard, they bought them cattle. They wouldn't buy them on. I didn't say I'm not going to sell them. First year I couldn't sell them anymore, so I went to Marshall. They said, okay, you'll pay the price. And I did. I took $500 less, $5 a pound less for my fat cattle, because I said I will not sell them to you right from the day that I turn them in. So this is what's happened, and I see it all over, and this someone guy said it. They said, okay, 148 today's the bid. Well, and then they say I'll do that next Friday. That's been the biggest wreck that we've ever had in the cattle business, as far as I'm concerned. And I wouldn't tolerate it, but I was one of the few that wouldn't. Don't let them guys buy them 2 weeks ahead of time. They don't need your cattle today. They already got bought cattle. They got cattle bought for 6 months from now. They come out of his sale barn, I'll bet you this week, and them cattle will be bought, half of them or more than be bought within 24 hours of that sale of the day. So that's all I want to say. But that's the way I see it. It's these people just done that to us, and we've let it go get out of hand.
Bernard, I agree with you. I just want to say thanks to you guys. You did a hell of a job here.
Yeah, thank you.
My question along that line, though, is this cash market is really what we're talking about. There is no cash market. You guys are living over there in Iowa. We live here in Nebraska. Why are they doing what you're saying? Somebody's doing it. It looks to me like if we could just get a hold of some of these big feedlots that are doing that, I'm not putting blame on them.
Won't even call.
Stop that and talk to them and say you might be good for yourself, but you're wrecking the industry. Is it that simple? And why are they doing what they're doing? That's my question. Does anybody have a comment on that?
Financially, well, I'd given the numbers a little while ago. Just the reported numbers were, a $4 advantage currently to the formula sellers last week versus the cash sellers. Now that isn't always that way. I watch the same report that comes out from USDA every week, and that it bounces up and down. But in general, they're rewarded, in general. But we're also aware of some cost plus arrangements where and they get paid outside of the value of the cattle, which is really skirting the intent of the reporting laws. And so I couldn't agree with you more that we absolutely need to have that segment step out. But as I said last week, 80% of the cattle that were slaughtered were of the formula kind. And just so everybody understands, you know, so if there's any heartburn as you're making phone calls about people thinking that, and Dave put it well, that 50-14 isn't a huge hurdle, but there are some that say, oh, that's just terrible, that's just way too much. It's the term cash negotiated, you know. The way my cattle are sold is called cash negotiated, but I get a phone call and I maybe get 5 minutes to think about it, likely not. The way it's come down to, a buyer will call and say, I've only got 120 head for the week. You know, if you want to get rid of cattle this week, go ahead. A story, a good friend of mine from South Dakota a year ago, on the back end of COVID, called me excited one Friday evening. Tyson had finally called him and bid on some cattle. They hadn't bid on his cattle for 9 months. And they wanted some cattle. Of course, they wanted them the next day already. And he, you know, gladly sold those 2 loads and was just all excited and hung up. And then he realized he didn't know what the price was. That's how bad it gets when you have to move pens of cattle, especially heifers, especially in heat like this. You're just thrilled when you finally get an offer. And so to call that cash negotiated is pretty loose. And I would say that the cash negotiated is actually probably somewhere really close to zero on a weekly basis.
Any other questions or comments?
Just real quick to that last question. 50-14, if you look at it from the other side, it sets a minimum standard of competition for the industry by forcing the big 4 packers to cash negotiate for 50% of those cattle, plant by plant, with 14-day delivery. It also forces the big lots to sell 50% cash negotiated. So it's both ways.
I'm going to say something.
Okay. I haven't been feeding cattle as long as this guy down here. He's 80 years. I'm in the been doing 70 years. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? I hear you guys worry about the packer or the cattle feeders are making money. Well, that's wrong. There's cattle feeders making money. It's because they're in bed with packer.
Yeah.
Now the way to stop that, and you got some auctioneer people right here today. It's too bad we can't control all the ranching industry because the average size of the cow-calf guy in the United States is 50, 60 head. And he's doing it for a sideline. And you have to get to him because most of the big guys here in Nebraska, south here, are feeding those southern cattle out of Tennessee, whatever, and those are coming from those smaller guys. But the good cattle are here in South Dakota and North Dakota, and the way to control them is right to the sale barn. When the order buyers come to the sale barn, you tell Shane and the auctioneer who you want those cattle to be sold to. Now it's going to hurt. But you shut out the order buyers to the big feedlots who supply the big packers. You will see some changes. Kenzy said he wasn't going to do anything with the big feedlot or the big packers that come to sell him some yearlings. He said no. You have to serve and say no. Now it's going to hurt. If you're that bad financially off that you can't keep the banker happy, you're in trouble. But decide who you're going to sell. I bought a lot of fat cattle, a lot of feeder cattle out of Montana, whatever, and they always complain about the price I was given. I said, you want to know how to feed cattle? And feed those cattle yourself. Oh, we don't want to do that. We don't know how to feed cattle. There's your problem. Control that egg. Control where those cattle are going to. Shut off the big cattle feeders, and you'll see some changes. Because that packer needs those people to feed cattle. They don't want to own the ranch. You can't put a cow in a crate. You can't put those cattle in confinement. Even some of them are trying to do that in confinement, raise that cow calf in a confinement, and it's not working. But you got to back off. Right here in the ranch country, you have control. You just got to decide how much control you're going to have and how how low you're going to be to control. Keep that calf at home till you get your price and sell it to Nielsen, the small cattle feeder, the farmer feeder.
Let me follow up on what he's saying, because this is what my dad used to talk about. In '75, the cow herd was so big, cattle herd was so big. You know, we had 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds. The other day, I was talking about Cap Dirks. I was at Cap's house the other day, and Tom showed me a picture of their grandfather's farm sale, the cattle herd. He had 85 2- and 3-year-old steers, besides his cows and his replacements. So Dinklage is correct here, but why can't we do that anymore? This thing called the hardbone discount. I had a guy tell me Louis Dinklage made millions bringing 2-year-old cattle out of the hills out west. But you can't keep them that long anymore now, can you? Oh, no, because we've narrowed your window of time up when you get to sell. We forced you in a position where you got to sell. Get rid of that hard bone. Get rid of that 20-month rule. Choice is choice is choice. Prime is prime is prime. What difference does it make how old it is? I sold some way up cows, some fat cows with choice. I said, where'd they go? Applebee's. Really? But they were old cows. Choice is choice.
Okay, I think they're wanting us to wrap up. You know, if anybody wants to continue this conversation, we'll be down at the RCAF and Icon booth in the North Building. And but I got to get the microphone back over to them. Thank you, everybody, for coming out. You know, action steps is keep calling and emailing our congressmen and our senators asking for 5014 MCOOL and sign the checkoff petition. Those 3 things are kind of what we wrapped up right here. And we all got to start speaking for ourselves and being our own lobbyists.
If you haven't done that, we have it in our booth. I'm sure you have it in yours.
Yep, Bassett Livestock also always has the petition out there to sign, and so tell your neighbors to head to town and sign it, or sign it online at checkoffvote.com. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, thank you.
Great.
Charlie, super.